Okay, so you're here because you really want to understand what makes things work.
Right.
You want to get to the core of how really successful organizations tick without all the fluff.
Absolutely.
You want to go deeper than the surface.
Yeah.
Today, we are doing something pretty interesting.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into a world where some major companies are absolutely thriving,
Mm.
but they're doing it with way less of the traditional management structure than you'd expect.
Quick.
We're going to peel back the layers and find out how these less conventional structures actually function.
Exactly. And we're really looking at this alternative idea to that typical top-down management approach that we're so used to.
Yeah.
And we've got some really cool examples.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at the Mondragon Corporation, which is just this huge organization.
Huge.
Yeah. And then the really innovative Bertzorg
Mm-hmm.
in the healthcare space.
Yeah.
Semco partners with their really interesting democratic approach.
Yeah.
And then Valve Corporation, which is really
Yeah.
unique.
Yeah, for sure.
The goal here is to understand not just what they do,
Right.
but how their reduced managerial oversight actually contributes to their success.
Yeah.
And maybe some surprising lessons we can pull out from their experiences.
Yeah, it's about challenging those assumptions.
Right.
So we're going to set aside the usual business school textbook stuff for a bit.
Yeah.
We're going to explore where these organizations came from, where they stand right now,
Mm.
and compare their performance in the real world. It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing to see how well some of these companies do.
Right.
Companies that you would think might not be as successful because they don't have that traditional structure.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with a huge player in the cooperative world,
Yeah.
the Mondragon Corporation in Spain.
Mondragon is a really powerful illustration of long-term viability.
Mm.
And from a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, it started really small back in 1956 in the Basque region of Spain.
Okay.
It was just a small group of workers who got together and formed a manufacturing cooperative. What's so amazing is how that initial spark turned into this massive federation over decades.
Right. And when we say diverse, you really mean diverse.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they've expanded so far beyond their original manufacturing focus.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're involved in finance, retail, even education.
Yeah.
I mean, this growth over so many years
Right.
really makes you question that assumption that worker-owned businesses just can't grow that big.
Exactly. And their current status really shows that,
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the largest business groups in all of Spain.
Wow.
It's a network of cooperatives with over 80,000 employees.
Okay, so this is not a small operation.
Not at all.
So what's really at the heart of Mondragon?
Well, their democratic governance is really central.
Okay.
The people who work there have a say in the decisions,
Right.
and they share in the profits.
Interesting.
It's a fundamental shift in how power works in a company.
Yeah, it's not all about some distant executive suite calling the shots.
Exactly.
It's much more distributed. So how does that actually play out in terms of their performance?
Right, their ability to compete.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually evidence that suggests they have some real advantages.
Okay.
Research indicates that worker cooperatives like Mondragon often have higher productivity.
Interesting.
And what's even more remarkable is that they tend to last longer than traditional firms.
Wow. Okay.
They seem to be more resilient and able to weather storms.
That's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
And it suggests that this model creates a really strong foundation.
So it's almost like by making the employees stakeholders,
Right.
you're not just sharing profits, you're building a long-term commitment in
Yeah.
a way that traditional companies often struggle to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've seen how it works in a large industrial setting.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears and look at something totally different.
Okay.
Bertzorg in the Netherlands
Right.
and their really innovative approach to home healthcare.
Bertzorg is fascinating. They're showing how a less hierarchical structure can completely revolutionize a whole sector.
Okay.
So they were founded in 2006.
Mm.
And their big idea was to create these small, self-managed teams of nurses.
Interesting.
The goal was to empower those nurses.
Yeah.
To really focus on patient-centered care.
Right.
And they wanted to do it with as little bureaucracy as possible.
Okay, so it's a real departure from the traditional way healthcare is delivered.
Oh, yeah.
Usually it's all about rigid hierarchies and tons of paperwork.
Exactly.
So how has this emphasis on self-management and reduced hierarchy actually worked out for them in the real world?
It's been incredibly successful.
Really?
Yeah, they've grown so much since they started.
Okay.
They now employ thousands of nurses.
Wow.
And their model has become influential all over the world.
Okay.
People are really looking to them for inspiration.
Yeah.
What's really impressive is that they've managed to achieve both high patient satisfaction
Mm-hmm.
and cost effectiveness.
That's a powerful combination.
It is, and it seems to be directly related to this idea of giving nurses more autonomy and reducing the administrative burden.
So they're saying trust the professionals on the front lines,
Right.
strip away the layers of management,
Yeah,
and you can actually get better care for less money.
exactly.
That's a pretty bold challenge to the way healthcare is usually run.
It is.
Okay, so now let's head over to Brazil
Okay.
and look at this really radical transformation of Semco Partners
Right.
under the leadership of Ricardo Semler.
Semco is an incredible example of what corporate democracy can look like when you take it really seriously.
Okay.
So in the 1980s,
Yeah.
Ricardo Semler basically turned this traditional manufacturing firm on its head.
Okay.
He gave an incredible amount of control to the employees.
Wow.
I mean, we're talking about significant business decisions,
Yeah.
control over their work schedules,
Uh-huh.
and even a lot of influence over their own salaries.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge shift.
It is.
I mean, to give employees that much control,
Right.
what was he thinking?
Well, he really believed in trust and empowerment. He was convinced that if you treat employees like responsible adults
Yeah.
and give them a real stake in the company,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to unleash their full potential.
Interesting.
You'll create a more engaged, more innovative, and ultimately more productive workforce.
So did it actually work?
Well, the long-term results are pretty compelling.
Okay.
I mean, Semco hasn't just survived. They've actually thrived.
Okay.
They've kept a strong presence in the market,
Mm-hmm.
and they've diversified into other sectors like environmental services and real estate.
Interesting.
Their practices have inspired so many organizations around the world.
Yeah, I can see why.
And most importantly, they've consistently had very low employee turnover,
Okay.
and they've remained profitable.
So it sounds like this radical approach to distributed control
Yeah.
really created a deeply invested and creative workforce.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for our final case study,
Yeah.
let's move to the tech world
Okay.
and look at Valve Corporation
Right.
in the United States.
Valve is a really interesting example within the tech industry,
Mm-hmm.
which is often pretty structured.
Yeah, for sure.
So they were founded in 1996,
Okay.
and they deliberately chose to have a completely flat organizational structure
Interesting.
right from the start.
Wow.
Their whole idea was to create an environment where employees could work on the projects they were most passionate about.
Yeah.
And they wanted them to collaborate really organically
Okay.
without all the traditional management roles getting in the way.
So it's almost like a constantly shifting network of self-organizing teams
Right.
forming and reforming around different projects.
Yeah, exactly.
So how has that worked out for a company as big and as influential as Valve?
Well, they definitely achieved a lot of success.
Right.
I mean, they're a major force in the gaming industry.
Yeah.
They're responsible for incredibly popular games.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they created this Steam platform,
Right.
which is a massive digital distribution service.
Yeah, everyone knows Steam. So it seems like their flat structure has been a big part of their success.
I think so.
But I imagine there have been some challenges too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, having no defined management roles could potentially lead to some issues.
You're right.
What kind of downsides have people pointed out?
Well, some of the criticisms focus on things like accountability
Okay.
and coordination across really big projects.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's also the question of how quickly they can make decisions.
Right, because without clear leadership,
Yeah,
it could take longer to reach a consensus.
exactly.
And in the fast-paced tech world,
Right.
that could be a real disadvantage.
It could.
So it seems like while this radical decentralization can really boost innovation, it can also create some problems with direction and efficiency.
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
Okay, so we've now looked at 4 very different organizations,
We have?
all of them operating with significantly less traditional management.
Right.
What are the big takeaways here?
Yeah. What are the common threads that help explain why they're able to compete and succeed?
Right, what's the secret sauce?
Well, when you look at all these different examples,
Yeah.
a few key factors keep popping up.
Okay.
The first one is employee engagement.
Okay.
In these more democratic or self-managed settings,
Hmm.
people tend to be much more satisfied with their jobs,
Interesting.
and they feel a stronger sense of ownership over their work.
Yeah, if you feel like you're just a cog in a machine,
Right.
it's hard to be truly motivated.
Exactly.
But when you have real autonomy and influence,
Yeah,
that can completely change how you feel about your work.
it can.
So what else contributes to their success?
Well, flexibility and innovation are also really important.
Yeah.
By giving employees the power to make decisions,
Hmm.
and encouraging fluid collaboration.
Yeah.
These organizations can adapt much faster to changes in the market.
Right, so they're not stuck in their ways. They
Exactly.
can pivot and respond to new challenges. And they're more likely to come up with innovative ideas.
Right, because those ideas can come from anywhere in the organization.
Yeah, it's not just about the people at the top.
Exactly.
It's about tapping into the collective intelligence of everyone.
Right.
So we've got engagement, we've got flexibility and innovation.
Yeah.
What's the third key element?
Shared responsibility.
Okay.
In a lot of these models, there's a much stronger sense of collective ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And that's often reinforced by things like profit sharing
Right.
or really transparent performance metrics.
Okay.
So everyone can see how their individual contributions are impacting the company's success.
Yeah, so it's not just about having a voice.
Right.
It's about having skin in the game.
Exactly.
Sharing in both the wins and the losses. So we've talked a lot about their competitiveness.
Yeah.
But what about their long-term viability?
Right, their resilience.
Yeah. Are these companies built to last?
Well, the research suggests that worker cooperatives and other democratically run companies are actually more resilient and tend to have a longer lifespan
Really?
than traditionally structured companies.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, they have higher employee engagement
Right.
and a stronger sense of shared responsibility.
So they have a more solid foundation.
Yeah, they do.
And there was some really interesting data to back that up.
There was.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a study done in Uruguay
Okay.
that found that worker cooperatives were much less likely to go out of business
Okay.
compared to traditional companies.
How much less likely?
Almost 30% less likely.
Wow. That's a huge difference.
It is.
It really highlights how resilient these alternative structures can be.
Yeah, it does.
So if we take a step back and look at everything we've discussed,
Yeah.
what's the main message here for someone who's trying to understand how businesses can thrive?
I think the key takeaway
Yeah.
is that success doesn't have to come from that traditional top-down management approach.
Right.
That's so often seen as the only way to do things.
Yeah.
We've seen so many different examples,
Hmm.
from Mondragon to Buurtzorg to Semco to Valve,
Yeah.
that show that alternative models,
Right.
based on things like employee engagement, flexibility, shared responsibility,
Yeah.
can be not only viable, but incredibly successful.
It really challenges how we think about what a company needs to look like in order to succeed.
It does.
So for you, the listener, think about what this means for you.
Right.
What are the implications of these models for how you view organizational effectiveness and employee empowerment?
Yeah.
Could any of these ideas be applied in your own work or your areas of interest?
It's a really interesting question, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, given how resilient these organizations are
Yeah.
and how successful they've been with less traditional management,
Right.
it makes you wonder what other assumptions we have about how companies should be structured
Yeah.
that maybe we need to rethink.
Food for thought.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.